What if I told you one of history's sharpest minds believed women differ from men not only in body, but in the very workings of the soul? And that modern evidence quietly agrees. Aristotle distinguished the male bent toward logos, reason, from the female tilt toward pathos, emotion. He wasn't hurling an insult, he was describing a pattern. Centuries later, neuroscientists reported stronger functional ties in women between the amygdala, which registers emotion, and the prefrontal cortex, where choices are made. In practice, that means feeling doesn't merely accompany many female decisions. It steers them. You do not need a lab to see this. You can watch it in the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Here is the first hard reality, signaled without fanfare. Emotion has primacy. Herodotus recounts Queen Atossa of Persia urging King Darius toward war with Greece after pride was wounded by a servant's boast. One moment of envy swelled into a campaign that redrew the map. Roman lawmakers feared similar tides of appetite and status hunger. They passed the Lex Oppia to check displays of luxury among women, worried that unchecked desire would drain the state. Today, look at the courtrooms and the industries that monetize grievance. Reputations altered, fortunes reversed, narratives hardening around a flare of feeling. This is not about resentment, it is about recognition. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Wisdom for any man who must keep his footing when emotion surges." The point is not to suppress the sea, but to read the currents. Beneath that surface lies a second, older law that drives the plot forward, the upward gaze. Call it hypergamy if you like. It is not a moral failing, it is an instinct, an orientation toward the man who stands higher today than he did yesterday. History offers a cold education. Jeanne Antoinette Poisson, known to us as Madame de Pompadour, rose from the bourgeoisie to the apex of Louis XV's court. When beauty's glow dimmed, she did not fall. She adapted, shifting from seduction to statecraft, preserving influence through counsel. Cleopatra aligned with Caesar and then with Antony, not only for romance, but for throne and survival. This pattern repeats in our own age. One large-scale analysis of digital courtship found women disproportionately initiate with men who signal higher education and earning potential, while responses drop off sharply below parity. Another study noted divorce risk rising when a man's economic trajectory collapses, not because affection evaporates in a day, but because the wiring that sorts risk from safety begins to ring an alarm. To the female mind, tuned by selection pressures, loss of status can read as a failure of protection. This is why complacency is the most dangerous plateau a man can reach. A softer truth would be kinder, but it would also be a lie. When a man becomes predictable, the upward gaze searches past him. Consider Emperor Claudius, brilliant administrator. Yes, but he relaxed into trust, while Messalina turned the palace into a marketplace of appetite, even auctioning herself and scheming toward lethal ends. Power did not save him from the penalty of predictability. The lesson is not to rage at nature. The lesson is to rise with it. A man who treats excellence as discipline rather than performance stops fearing the law of the upward gaze. He orients it. He becomes a mountain that can be approached, circled, admired, but never conquered. None of this is an argument for cynicism. It is a manual for clarity. The emotional current explains the immediate pull. The upward gaze explains the longer arc. Together, they make behavior look less random and more rhythmic. If you can anticipate the rhythm, you can keep time without stumbling. But understand, this second law introduces a further ordeal. For even when a woman chooses a man on the mountain, the choosing does not end. A quieter trial begins. One conducted in tone, glance, silence, and timing. It is not a duel of swords. It is a test of center. Fail it, and attraction drains away without a word. Pass it, and respect deepens, sometimes in a single breath. The next movement opens that hidden courtroom and names the rules few men realize they are already breaking. Once you grasp that emotion, sways the moment, and the upward gaze shapes the arc, another layer comes into view. The trials that women set, often without words, to measure the worth of the man beside them. Aristotle described this unspoken tribunal as the constant judgment women pass on men, not out of cruelty, but from instinct. Call them tests, call them trials, call them subtle calibrations of respect. Whatever the name, their impact is decisive. Consider Odysseus returning after 20 years, 10 spent at war, 10 spent in wandering. When at last he stood in Ithaca, Penelope did not rush into his arms. She acted as though she did not recognize him, allowed rival suitors to mock him in his own hall, and watched from silence. She needed to see whether he could endure insult, whether his center held. Only when he bent his bow and struck down those who had dishonored his house did she yield. To modern ears, this may sound cold. To ancient instincts, it was survival. A man who breaks under pressure cannot defend his own. Modern research confirms what myth conveyed. A 2017 study in social psychological and personality science found that women initiate more stress tests in relationships than men. Picking fights, withdrawing, even flirting with others. Not to sabotage, but to gauge resilience. Psychologists call it commitment verification. Most men misread it as needless drama. They beg, they lash out, or they collapse into appeasement. Each failed response corrodes attraction until one day, as many men have experienced, she looks at him with eyes emptied of spark. History provides brutal illustrations. Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia, wavered in a time of revolution. His wife Alexandra urged him to be resolute, to rule with an iron hand. He hesitated, faltered, pleaded with men who despised him. Alexandra recorded in her diary, "He is too soft. They will eat him alive." She was right. Within months, the Romanovs were executed in a basement. Weakness in a leader spelled death for all who depended on him. To the feminine eye, frailty is not a flaw. It is a fatal risk. But here lies a twist many overlook. These tests are not punishment. They are training. Each flare of coldness, each provocation, each silence is an arena in miniature where a man proves whether he is still unmoved. The Spartan ritual dramatized this truth. Before marriage, a woman shaved her head, dressed in male garments, and confronted her future husband. The point was not humiliation, but to see whether he could assert his role past service appearances. If he could not, the union dissolved before it began. Respect had to be earned at the threshold, not granted later. From these trials emerges the demand for something greater than brute defiance. Because women despise weakness, but they also recoil from tyranny. What they respond to most deeply is strength under mastery. Caesar demonstrated this when he confronted Cleopatra. He did not flatter or grovel. He burned her fleet in the harbor, seizing command. Yet he did not descend into cruelty. Cleopatra did not hate him for it. She admired him so much that she smuggled herself into his quarters, rolled in a carpet. This paradox is echoed in modern psychology. A 2016 study in personality and individual differences found that dominance paired with emotional control consistently ranked as most attractive. Raw force repels. Disciplined power draws devotion. History abounds with men who miss this balance. Henry V wielded authority with violence, executing wives when disobedient. Did he secure loyalty? No. He bred deceit, infidelity, and rebellion. Contrast that with the samurai ideal. The warrior was expected to wield a blade without hesitation, yet compose poetry the same night, to embody both severity and grace, both threat and restraint. That was the core of Bushido. That duality is what inflames respect. Women do not long for perpetual gentleness or perpetual terror. They long for the man who could destroy, yet chooses to protect. But even this is not the summit. Strength under control is necessary, yet it is incomplete. There remains the question of ethos, whether a man carries an inner code that no storm can bend. Without it, dominance becomes posturing, and restraint collapses into calculation. The next truth reveals why conviction, not comfort, is the fire that brands a man unforgettable in the memory of women. Aristotle hinted at this when he wrote that passion is forged in conflict rather than comfort. The unsettling truth is that women bond most deeply, not through stability, but through contrast. Pleasure beside frustration, joy beside ache. It is the interplay, not the constant, that burns memory into the soul. History offers haunting examples. Lord Byron, the poet who left Europe littered with broken hearts, never relied on kindness alone. He enthralled women with brilliance, then vanished without explanation. He wrote letters dripping with fire, then publicly embarrassed his lovers in salons. Lady Caroline Lamb called him mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Yet her obsession with him consumed her to the point of madness. Neuroscience has since mapped the same mechanism. A 2014 study in social cognitive and affective neuroscience revealed that women's brains release far more dopamine, the neurotransmitter of craving, under intermittent reward than under consistent attention. Translation: the man who is sometimes warm and sometimes distant will dominate a woman's mind far longer than the one who is unfailingly nice. This is the power of emotional imprinting. It does not ask for cruelty, but for contrast. The Japanese art of kintsugi repairs shattered pottery with veins of gold, making cracks the source of beauty. So it is with memory and love. The man who frustrates and then restores, who withdraws and then returns, leaves marks that glisten rather than fade. Napoleon and Josephine embodied this truth. Their letters swing between burning jealousy and overwhelming devotion. Even when Napoleon abandoned her for politics, Josephine whispered his name with her last breath. She could not forget the man who made her feel everything. Yet emotional contrast alone is not enough. Devotion requires proof, and the currency is sacrifice. Not the shallow gestures of gifts or compliments, but wounds carried for principle. The Vikings knew this. Warriors did not win women by promising comfort, but by returning from battle blooded and triumphant. Their scars were not flaws. They were receipts. In World War II, letters from soldiers on the front revealed the same pattern. Men who spoke frankly of brushes with death received responses filled with heightened passion compared to those who softened their accounts. Women did not merely love them, they revered them. A 2018 study in evolutionary psychology echoed the sagas. Men who took physical risks were rated more attractive, not because of recklessness, but because risk signaled courage. The danger for modern men is mistaking toil for sacrifice. Working overtime to buy affection or tolerating disrespect is not proof of devotion. It is self-betrayal. True sacrifice is unasked and unperformed for applause. It is walking away from corruption even when it costs you. It is standing firm in a burning building because your mission demands it. These moments etch themselves into the female psyche because they prove a man values principle above comfort, even above survival. That is what secures loyalty on a primal level. But even sacrifice is subject to time's erosion. Desire itself has seasons, and they are not eternal. Catherine the Great of Russia illustrates this. In youth, she devoured passion, taking lovers who embodied danger and unpredictability. In later years, her tastes shifted. Her partners younger, gentler, more ornamental. It was not merely preference, it was biology. A 2022 study in human nature charted this shift clearly. As women enter their mid-30s, attraction to dominant, testosterone-heavy men declines, while preference for stable, nurturing partners rises. Researchers called it the caregiver shift, a subconscious pivot from passion to security as fertility wanes. This is the brutal truth of expiration. If you meet her before the shift, you encounter her most irrational fire. If you meet her after, you may still receive loyalty, but not the same untamed flame. Men who misunderstand this find themselves trapped, resented by women who regret their choices, or bewildered by a love that once raged and now merely simmers. The Greeks saw it long ago in their worship of Aphrodite Pandemos, goddess of carnal frenzy. celebrated by the young but gradually supplanted by cooler allegiances as years passed. The lesson is not despair. It is timing, awareness, and strategy. A man who channels youthful passion into lasting form captures fire before it fades. One who enters later must accept depth without intensity. And one who grows complacent while she still burns risks becoming the ghost she curses when her desires shift. But there is still one force that transcends even biology. One magnet that can hold a woman's devotion beyond the pull of years. It is not charm, not wealth, not even strength. It is mission, the sense that you live for something larger than yourself. And that truth leads us into the final and most liberating revelation. All the patterns, emotions sway, the upward gaze of hypergamy, the silent trials, the imprint of contrast, the demand for sacrifice, even the expiry of desire, point toward one ultimate truth. Attraction is not permanent, and approval is never unconditional. So what keeps a woman tethered when biology wanes and time erodes? Aristotle gave a clue when he wrote that happiness depends on ourselves, but he stopped short of the brutal conclusion. A woman does not stay for your happiness. She stays if you embody a mission so vast that she feels she is part of something greater than herself. History's giants show the way. Alexander of Macedon did not draw loyalty by youth or beauty. He commanded armies across continents because he embodied destiny. Women sought him not for comfort, but for glory. Napoleon, in contrast, began as a liberator with fire in his veins. Josephine adored him then. But as he slid into tyranny, as his mission dimmed into mere power hunger, her devotion cooled. The distinction was not wealth or charm, it was trajectory. A 2023 study in the Journal of Personality confirmed this timeless pattern. Women were more attracted to men who appeared to be on a rising path, regardless of current status. A broke artist with vision proved more magnetic than a comfortable man with none. The brain scans showed it clearly. When women heard men speak of mission, neural activity surged. When men spoke of daily routine, it flatlined. This explains why Steve Jobs, flawed and often ruthless, drew near fanatical loyalty, while countless competent men went unnoticed. Jobs embodied purpose. He built more than products. He built myth. Women, like men, feel gravity when someone lives for something larger than self. That pull is stronger than status, stronger than biology, stronger even than time. But here lies the final snare. Too many men confuse goals with mission. A goal is to earn 6 figures. A mission is to change how men think about money. A goal is to marry. A mission is to build a dynasty that outlives you. Goals are private ambitions. Missions are stories that others, women included, ache to enter. Women do not queue for a man's lifestyle, they queue for a man's legend. The Japanese spoke of ikigai, the point where passion, skill, and need converge. Find that, and you no longer chase attraction. Attraction chases you. Yet even mission is not the last word. The final revelation is harsher. A woman's love was never meant to be your ultimate pursuit. The modern lie tells men that worth is measured by being chosen, that happiness is secured through validation. But the Greeks did not raise statues to the most desired men. They honored those who forged reality. Consider Heracles, enslaved, humiliated, forced into women's clothes by Queen Omphale. He was not broken. He endured his labors not to win affection, but to purge himself, to prove strength to his own soul. Contrast him with Orpheus, who begged for Eurydice, who obeyed conditions only to falter in weakness by looking back. His loss was not because of cruelty from the gods, but because he needed reassurance. The man who requires approval forfeits himself. Modern psychology stumbled on the same lesson. A 2021 study in psychological science found that men who derive self-worth from external validation suffer higher rates of anxiety and depression. Why? Because they place their center outside themselves. Women do not truly want to be the prize. They want to be swept along in the orbit of a man who would burn regardless of their presence. Catherine the Great never chose sycophants. She chose men whose focus exceeded her. Hannibal did not cross the Alps for affection. Leonardo da Vinci did not paint for approval. Their fire made them irresistible precisely because they did not bend their mission to win favor. And here lies the liberation. To abandon women is childish. To chase them is weakness. The mature path is to see attraction as a byproduct of a life aimed at mastery, excellence, and creation. When you stop asking, "Does she like me?" and start asking, "Am I the man I respect?" you invert the game. You become the storm. And storms do not plead for wind. They summon it. So do not live to be chosen. Live to choose yourself. Build something that outlives your name. And let women in the world align themselves as they must. Because the final truth is this: you were never meant to be defined by her gaze. You were meant to define yourself. And in that fire lies the only loyalty that endures.